Good morning, everyone. I'm Dominique Hazaël-Massieux from the WCC staff. I'm also called Dom. I'm the representative of the WCC on the MDN Product Advisory Board. As many of you will know, MDN is one of the most popular documentation portal for web developers out there, and WCC sits on the Product Advisory Board there, along with Google, Samsung, Boku, Microsoft, and of course, Mozilla, who's leading the MDN project overall. Thanks to the work that the Mozilla team has done, a survey was organized over the past few months. The WCC community was involved. We got lots of input from chairs and others on what that survey needed to ask to the developers out there. And we have the pleasure to have Kadir from the MDN team to give us some early insight as what was learned from the survey, both in the process of doing the survey and in collecting answers on the survey. And I leave the room to Kadir.
Thank you, Dom. So, yeah, as Dom said, these days I'm the product lead for MDN Web Docs. But I started I started my career as a web developer back in 1997, and this is my first TPEG. So seeing how the sausage is made was really interesting, and you all are really amazing. Okay, are we all set up? Yes. So this project that I'm going to talk about, it started, just a moment. Yeah. So it started shortly after CSS Grid was shipped in 2017, in late 2017. CSS Grid was a massive success. So in Mozilla's developer relations team, we ask ourselves, how can we have more of this? How can we duplicate the success of this? And how can we support something like this again? And CSS Grid was a success because it addressed a real user need. It was shipped in roughly all the browsers at roughly the same time. And it came with tooling, in our case, the CSS Grid Inspector. And all of that was seriously awesome. That said, CSS Grid was years in the making, and layout had been an issue for web developers, at least since the time we abused tables to implement our UI designs back in the 90s. And so looking at this, we had a few questions. Why did it take until 2012 to address this problem specifically? Why did it take until 2017 to ship? And how was this coordinated to roughly ship at the same time in different browsers? And what were the roadblocks for that? And what were the pivotal elements to moving this forward? So lots of questions. And so we took a step back to see what the whole process looked like from Mozilla's perspective. And after interviewing numerous people involved in different stages of the process, we identified three distinct phases: research, then standardization and implementation, and adoption at the end. Now, as you can probably see, this is a very simplified version that smoothes out many things, and it looks like a pipeline, when in reality it's actually more like a loop, or like a loop of loops, and loops that loop back on themselves or something. You get the idea. But it was good enough for us to get started. Now, most of us had a pretty good idea about the adoption side, and that's also where MDN really shines. And we had some idea about the standardization and implementation phase. But we really wanted to know more about the research phase. So how do we learn about developer pain points, what they need, and how do we prioritize what we are going to ship on the web platform? And we interviewed more than 10 people involved in different stages of this process, and it became clear that there was no formal research, really. At Mozilla, we have an amazing user research team for Firefox. The same is not really true when it comes to developer research, not even close. And it's important, because at a place like Mozilla, we have limited resources. We can't go after everything. And there are serious opportunity costs that we have to pay when we decide to do something, because it usually means that we cannot do something else. And this is what we heard from people about how things are prioritized. And there's one thing that really stood out from almost every single person saying the same thing. We need to hear more from developers, more from people who are not already in our channels. That was something that we heard across the board. And it makes so much sense, because none of us can be successful without that part. It's hard to prioritize the right thing without knowing about developer pain points. And it's hard to find the right solution, and it's hard to get people to adopt something if it's not solving one of their needs, or it's not solving it in the right way. So for all of these reasons, we proposed the developer needs assessment. So what is that exactly? It's a prioritized list of designer and developer needs. It's a simple tool for harsh prioritization, representing diverse populations and a huge feature space. And it's published on MDN. It's not owned by a single browser vendor. So we initially proposed this under the umbrella of our product advisory board, where we have representation from browser vendors, the W3C, and industry stakeholders. And as a community, we thought we need to have at least a common understanding of the facts when it comes to needs, even if we draw different conclusions from them. And then finally, it's reproduced annually, and I think this is really important. As an industry or as a community, we need to know whether we are addressing developer pain points. And to understand whether we are prioritizing correctly, we need to track those needs and pain points over time so that we can see the impact of our efforts. So if you're prioritizing correctly, the needs list should look differently next year, and the thing that's at the top shouldn't be at the top anymore. And if you do this well, we think the MDN Web Developer Needs Assessment, or MDN Web DNA for short, it can be the voice of designers and developers working on the web. And asking about web developer designer needs and frustrations is not trivial. The problem space is so vast, and the audience is extremely diverse. So let me tell you a little bit about the process we went through to do that. And I apologize up front. I'm not a researcher. We worked with a very talented Alison McKeever from Pinpoint Research to do the research design and to conduct this. And I'll do my best to channel her in this. So in January this year, we started the process by fielding a survey to our product advisory board members, asking for data they would use for decision making. And we then had almost 20 in-depth interviews with web developers and designers before putting the initial version of the survey together. And this is important. That's because we wanted the survey to be rooted in the voice of developers and designers from the very get-go. And had we run the survey without those interviews, the questions would have been based on the internal perspectives of browser vendors. By conducting the interviews, we made sure to derive the survey questions from the stories of developers and designers about what is important to them in their work and on the web, but also things that cause them frustrations. So it was an outside-in process instead of from the inside out, and that was really important to us. So to go from the interview findings to the survey, we followed Pinpoint's analysis process from observations, what we saw and heard in the interviews, to insights, what it means, and then up to critical themes, why it matters. And we are continuing that process to incorporate the survey findings into what we learned from the pilot interviews. What this means in practice is that we transcribed 16 hours of interviews. We then coded them. And then we bucketed them to derive insights for the items in our survey. And that is a very hands-on process. It's still very analog. And so based on these themes, we constructed the central survey question around the frustration of web developers and designers. And then we continued to work with our product advisory board on the overall survey with pilot interviews at every stage where we watched multiple people take the survey to ensure that survey questions would be as unambiguous as possible. So with the help of more than 30 stakeholders from various MDN product advisory board member companies, we have put together the final version of the survey, and it was fielded in July this year on MDN, but also through the channels of our product advisory board members, the W3C, Google, Microsoft, Samsung, and Boku. And not just in English, like here. We also localized it, the survey and the call to action into 8 languages. This is the Japanese one, but also into Arabic, simplified Chinese, English, French, Korean, Brazilian Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. And I'm very happy to announce that after fielding the survey for 4 weeks, more than 76,000 developers and designers took us up on it, and more than 28,000 developers and designers took the 20 minutes necessary to complete the full survey, and that's from 173 countries total. So, yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah, and just to underline this, just from the complete responses alone, that's more than 10 or almost 10,000 hours of time contributed from the community, from developers and designers to help us understand what their needs and frustrations are. So we believe that this makes the MDN Web Developer Needs Assessment the biggest developer and designer-focused survey ever conducted. And with that scale come benefits. So we can segment the data by experience level, by developer role, country, by satisfaction level, and we can still retain a high level of confidence for the results that we get. So after talking about the survey in the abstract for so long, I'd like to share some questions with you, aside from the main question of the survey about frustrations. And these are in no particular order. So the first one we have here is how would you rate your overall satisfaction with the web as a platform and set of tools to enable you to build what you need or want? Another one we had was what are the things that you would like to be able to do on the web, but like web platform features to do? And then what are the biggest pain points for you when it comes to JavaScript development? And we had the same question for HTML, CSS, and WebAssembly as well. And because it's boring to just see the questions, let me share a little more. So the first one is a list of the top 5 items that cause developers the most frustration. And this is across all countries, roles, experience levels, etc. So this is the main question of the survey. First one on the list is interoperability, having to support specific browsers. And yes, we do have a follow-up question about which browsers. And the second on the list is documentation, but this is very specific. It's documentation for frameworks and libraries, not web standards. We've asked for that too, but that's further down the list. The third on the list is once again an interoperability issue. At this time, the fact that developers have to avoid using a feature because it's not available broadly. Fourth on the list is testing across browsers. And fifth on the list is once again an interoperability issue, and this one about making a design look and work the same across browsers. I don't know about you, but I see a theme here. So in our final report, we'll go back to our 16 hours of interviews and add detail and color from those interviews to these findings. The second item I want to share is this one. When a new web technology relevant to your needs becomes available, what are the main barriers to adoption? Usually, when this question is asked, regardless of platform, it's documentation and sample code that is that's what developers really care about. That's usually the #1 spot. And it is listed here, but it's in second position. The #1 barrier to adoption on the web platform is broad interoperability across browsers. It's not all bad, though. And here's another question that I wanted to share with you. What are the biggest pain points for you when it comes to HTML development? And the answer is nothing. For at least 1/3 of the audience, for the people we've asked, they don't have pain points when it comes to HTML, which is pretty amazing. And finally, how would you rate your overall satisfaction with the web as a platform and set of tools to enable you to build what you need or want? And a full 76% are either satisfied or very satisfied, and that's something to be proud of here of all places. Yeah. I hope you keep that in mind when you hear complaints about the web developer experience. So this is pretty awesome to see. And this and so much more will be in the full report that we intend to publish in November this year. And we'll give a sneak preview of more of the results at the breakout session at 11 a.m. But as I said, we want this to be an annual thing. So the next iteration will start in March 2020. And we'll field the surveys in May 2020, and then hopefully publish the results in September. And again, hopefully in time for TPEC 2020, so you can share the results there. And this is where we need your help and input. This is the first iteration of the survey, and it's far from perfect, but it's a start. And you are the target audience for the results. So we want the next iteration to be much better than this, but we need your help for that. We need you to tell us how you want to reuse the results and how useful this is for you, and what the granularity level is that you need to make decisions based on this data set. And tell us what segmentations you need when you need to prioritize. We want to make the survey as actionable as possible, and with your help, we hope that we can iterate on this to really make it as actionable as possible. And the goal is to hear the voice of designers and developers working on the web, and to have a single and simple tool for harsh prioritization, representing diverse populations and a huge feature space. And I'm extremely excited that we have made this first step in this direction. And many thanks to everyone who has contributed to that, and I'm looking forward to many more.